Those are hot.
We're up and hot. Okay. Okay, so we're open. But we do need to hold them, right? They're not hot for me.
They're attached to the cord because it's low now.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman Smith, glad you could be here. And Chairman Knight's on his way, so we'll go ahead and get started. We appreciate you attending this hearing of the Subcommittee on Higher Ed Appropriations. We're going to spend some time taking testimony this afternoon from the president of the Kennesaw State University and the head of Dr. Casey White, the head of all student affairs. I'm sorry, Casey, if I didn't get exactly the title correct. And then we'll have testimony from 2 KSU students as well, questions and answers from the committee. I'm not sure how long we'll go, but we're going to spend some time. Let me talk just a few minutes before we get started, President, about the reason for this hearing, and President Harmon, and thank you for coming. We will obviously. You read about some of the challenges in the local papers and in the Atlanta papers that you're going through, and being an interim anything can't be that easy. And I hope you understand this hearing has nothing to do with personalities or anything in that sense. It has to do with the concerns that have been raised, the lawsuits that are currently in place. This committee has responsibility for all funding for all university system units. So we have a responsibility to take a look at what and how the funds are spent. The allocation of those resources is the responsibility of the Board of Regents, and we understand that separation. And as I've been quoted in the newspapers, I want to look at the overall priorities. That's our job here, is to look at the allocations that are made, to look at how the monies that the taxpayers give us and give to you to spend are spent on, at least from my personal opinion, educational programming. And that's what members of the committee I want to bore in on. I mean, we do have our pronoun chart up there, and I know that is something that has been in the news, and we want to talk about, and there'll be some questions about who paid for that and our taxpayer resources funding that, and we'll get to that. But I want to talk about the allocation of resources in student affairs. And I've read the Regents, the report that you submitted to Regents, and I want to talk about some of those specifics and the tiered system. And I understand some about tiers, but I also understand that we've got that pesky little equal protection clause in the Constitution that requires that all organizations and not all organizations, but all people be treated equally. And I want to, and this is not about inclusiveness or non-inclusiveness. This is about equality of access to resources and actually the outcome of access to resources. So we'll talk about a lot of those things. We've got a lot of information. The committee members, you all have a significant amount of material there with respect to the material we're going to cover today. So the first, I think Dr. Ken Harmon has a statement, and we'll start with that, and then we'll go to Dr. White, and then we'll go with Miss Tori Thompson and Miss Davis, Miss Mara Davis, and we'll give you an opportunity to have to talk about your experience on campus as well, and the access to resources and that type of thing. So thank you all for coming, and Dr. Harmon, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I may, just some very brief prepared remarks here. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to join you today and for the opportunity to discuss some of the challenges we are seeking to address on behalf of our students, faculty, and staff at Kennesaw State University. We deeply appreciate the commitment of this committee, the legislature, the Board of Regents, and the Chancellor have made to higher education in Georgia. This commitment has allowed KSU to grow and develop from a small commuter college into a comprehensive institution of higher learning that is among the largest in the United States. We have grown into a destination institution for some of our community's most accomplished students, and we are pleased to have the chance to continue to work with each of you to maintain that mission for the future. I would specifically like to express a special thanks to you, Mr. Chairman, for your service in the legislature and for your representation of our university. For 30 years, you have served as a champion for Kennesaw State, and we are grateful for that decades-long support. In times of transition, such as we are experiencing now at KSU, we have to engage with our community and our leaders to identify obstacles and opportunities to ensure that we are achieving the ultimate goal of educating the leaders of tomorrow. We've been proud of the growth of the university and have recognized with this expansion comes a range of viewpoints, connections, and perspectives that sometimes find themselves politically and culturally at odds with one another. But as a public institution, our policies and actions must be such that the engagement over these positions is protected, viewpoints are respected, and opportunities to express these beliefs are equitable. While we prepare to graduate a new class of leaders from KSU this spring, it is the challenges the institution is facing which prompt our discussions today. The university has been the subject of critical media coverage, uncertainty through transitions, and recently legal actions on behalf of students where claims are being made against our administration that I have found deeply troubling. As I noted, our goal must be to protect and encourage the marketplace of ideas that exist at KSU. And any action or policies that run counter to that effort have to be identified and addressed. In recent weeks, there's been a good deal written about some materials that were gathered by staff of the LGBTQ Resources Center. These materials provided some information on gender-neutral pronouns. As the university noted in response to questions on this pamphlet, there is no official policy that mandates the use of gender-neutral pronouns. The materials in question are not new or widely distributed on campus, and these materials are available as a resource for students who have an interest in or questions about the subject. In the wake of the two lawsuits recently filed, KSU administrators engaged in a wide-ranging review of operations across the university with a specific focus on the Division of Student Affairs. This effort included a review of student affairs policies, the classification system used for registered student organizations, RSOs, an analysis of funding and allocation of student activity fees, and a review of event management among various campus entities. This review identified a number of findings and proposed actions that will rectify areas of concern. These areas include the existing tier structure for RSOs and determinations used for each tier, security fee guidelines and the application of these fees to student groups, and training and guidance on compliance with Board of Regents policy on freedom of expression and speech, among others. I have ordered action to begin immediately to address these findings. Further, KSU recently has been working closely with the University System of Georgia to complete a comprehensive administrative review of the institution. We will now expand this process to conduct a specific third-party assessment of policies, practices, and responsibilities within the Student Affairs Division. This examination will provide additional strategic recommendations to augment those identified in our internal review and offer next steps to help make the division as strong as it can be. And finally, we must foster a campus environment where civility reigns in the engagement between parties on discussions of topics where passions run strong on all sides. We must be ever vigilant against efforts to delegitimize opposing viewpoints or give in to groupthink against positions that may make some uncomfortable or feel challenged. We must ensure that policies and procedures of the institution are constitutional, equitable, and provide a platform for all students to participate in the marketplace of ideas that KSU should be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, President Harmon. Members of the committee, what I think I'd like to do is, Dr. White, you're here to answer questions, correct? You didn't have a statement yourself, is that correct?
No statement.
Okay, I just want to make sure I didn't want to leave you out of the order. Members of the committee, if you'll indulge me, what I'd like to do is now hear from the two students that have come to testify. They each have a statement, and then if everybody would be available for questions as well. Well, I think logistically the easiest way to do this is Miss Thompson and Miss Davis, if you could come and maybe sit right here in front of this gentleman with the beard and the glasses right there. He's a very nice man, so if you'll sit right there. I'll turn those microphones on, and you can I think you each have a 5 to 10 minute statement. And if you'll introduce yourself to the members of the committee and tell them where you're from. We always like to know what part of the state that you come from. And then it'll be your turn, and we'll also have the opportunity for the committee members to ask at the end of your testimony both President Harmon, Dr. White, and yourselves questions about the subject matter today. Does that sound good? Yeah. Sounds good. So who's first? Is that Ms. Thompson? Okay. Let me turn your microphone on. Oh, yeah. It's not a touch screen. I'm technologically incapable. This is nothing new. All right. Ms. Thompson, your microphone should be live.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Victoria Thompson, and I am a sophomore at Kennesaw State University. I'm a Dean's List student and chairman of the Kennesaw State University College Republicans. I'm here today to explain to you all the challenges we face as conservatives at KSU. First of all, I have never been a person that has forced my political beliefs on any other student. I'm extremely tolerant of other viewpoints, and I actually enjoy, rather than be threatened by a diversity of thought. However, that same tolerance has never been extended to me, and it is not extended to other conservatives on the campus of KSU. Although I do participate in class, I'm very careful not to express my political opinions for fear of retribution by my professors and fellow students. Many of my professors make it a regular habit to push their own political agendas in the classroom, and I fear if I express my own opinion in opposition, I will receive a poor grade in the class. I have witnessed other conservative students be verbally attacked and bullied by other students and professors in class because of their differing opinion. In one of my classes, my professor regularly talks about how stupid Republicans are. He makes fun of us on a regular basis, and as a result, I have been terrified to talk about the fact that I am a Republican or express my viewpoint during discussion. At one point, my professor showed a 30-minute video of Republican Senator Josh McCoon speaking on religious liberty. At the end of the video, he bashed his viewpoints on religious liberty and how much of a waste of taxpayer money to speak and legislate on behalf of religious liberty is. Ladies and gentlemen of this committee, tolerance should be a two-way street. I am here today because I can no longer live in fear for my grades and my social standing at KSU because I am a conservative. College should be the time in our lives when diversity of thought is not only accepted, but encouraged. Kennesaw State University is a public university, and all viewpoints should share freedom of speech, and the entire campus should be a free speech zone. This is not the time to indoctrinate. It is a time to educate and encourage thought among students so that they can come up with their own belief system rather than agree with their professor's viewpoint out of fear. It has been a practice of the administration to discriminate against conservative organizations. As I am sure you have all seen in the news, 2 other conservative organizations are seeking legal recourse for being charged for security at their events, which has not been equally applied to all student organizations. About a month ago, I received notice from my school that in order for me to have Secretary of State Brian Kemp at my meeting, I was required to pay a $55 security fee for a minimum of 4 hours, along with a long drawn-out contracting process where in order for me to have one speaker, I had to get the speaker to sign this contract, along with getting this contract approved by 4 different departments within the KSU bureaucracy. These fees are unaffordable for student-run organizations, and the extensive bureaucratic red tape was meant to exhaust us into not holding events. Due to this strenuous process, Brian Kemp was unable to attend our meeting in February. These unfair practices have had a chilling effect on our First Amendment freedoms of speech and association, and it is my belief that they were meant to do so. Chairman Earhart, I want to thank you for your fairness and concern for the well-being of the students at Kennesaw State University, and thank you for the opportunity for me to speak here today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson. We appreciate your statement. Okay. Next is Ms. Mara Davis. Oh, again, technology, your generation, not mine. There we go.
Hello, my name is Mara Davis, and I am a second semester freshman at Kennesaw State University. I am also a conservative and a member of the Kennesaw State College Republicans Club on campus. I am here today to discuss an incident involving a teacher and one of my classmates. About a month ago, we were having a discussion in one of my classes about gender. Many of the students were agreeing that there were multiple gender besides male and female. My teacher made it a requirement for us to voice our opinion. Being very conservative, I stood up and voiced my opinion about how I believe there were only two genders, male and female. I did this in a very polite and calm manner, might I add. My teacher proceeded to tell me I was wrong and decided it would be best for me to be kicked out of class for the remainder of the day. As I was grabbing my backpack, phone, and keys, a student in my class proceeded to throw a plastic disposable water bottle at me. I did not say anything to this student. I just continued to walk out of the classroom into my dorm. Many people in my position would forget that this ever happened. For me, however, this was not possible because this is not the first time an incident has occurred in a class at Kennesaw State. Just this morning, my teacher placed me in the pro-choice group for an abortion debate that we were having, knowing that I am pro-life. I have no problem being in a group with the opposite opinion, but I know she did this intentionally. When I expressed my concern to her privately after class, she told me I could either debate for the pro-choice side or receive a 0 for the assignment. In the rubric, it says to come to her if we had any concerns. When I told her this, she said, and I quote, "That only applies to the other students." We are required to state our opinions, and yet I fear receiving backlash because my opinion is different than my professors and peers. Being a conservative on campus that is overwhelmingly liberal has proven to be remarkably difficult. In many of my classes, particularly my women and gender studies class, I am the only conservative. Oftentimes, my opinion cannot be heard due to fear of scrutiny that is directed towards me by my peers and professors alike. Time and time again, my professors and peers have discussed topics such as gender, abortion, gun control, and politics, all topics that I have very strong opinions about and that I would like to be heard. Since my opinion would never match those of my classmates, however, I never voice my opinion anymore. I used to at the beginning of the semester, but I have received so much hate and scrutiny over the few months I have been a student here that I decided it is not even worth it to share my thoughts with others. Many professors and students here said that they always support everyone and want open dialogue with others at the university. However, this only proves to be true when the opinion and thoughts are the same, or at least similar. As soon as one disagrees with someone else at the school, they receive hate for it. This goes for everyone, not just conservatives. It is remarkably difficult to voice your opinion when you know that over half the university will hate you for it. I cannot even talk about politics and other issues with my closest friends because I fear being made fun of and scrutinized for it. I do have a few other conservative friends that I can voice my opinions with and bounce thoughts and ideas off of. These friends, however, are very few in number. My liberal friends far outnumber my conservative ones, and although this is not an issue for me, I should not have to fear voicing my opinion to others. No one should. There needs to be a change not only on the Kennesaw campus, but on every campus in America that faces this problem. I know that Kennesaw State is a particularly democratic school, but there are schools all around the country where people are being hated on for not having the most popular opinion about serious issues. People should be allowed to speak their minds without fear. Another example is when the Take a Knee KSU movement went around campus after a few cheerleaders kneeled during the national anthem at one of the KSU football games. The administration decided it would be appropriate to no longer allow the female cheerleaders to stand on the field during the sacred song I know I hold so near and dear to my heart. As I was walking to class, I passed many of the protesters that were taking a knee on the campus green, a place where many students come to hang out, do homework, or to sit with friends if it's nice out. I kept my mouth shut as I walked by these students and faculty members, until one student came up to me and asked if I would sign a petition to allow the cheerleaders to be back on the field during the national anthem. I politely said no, and as a result, was cussed out and told some very mean things. I was called some very mean names, and they started telling me the places that I could go. I was even called an idiotic conservative. This is not okay and needs to be discussed. It is so horrible to me to think that a student cannot even say no politely to a petition without being scrutinized for it. And the sad fact is, I am not the only conservative on campus that things like this has happened to. Many of my conservative friends face scrutiny every day simply for being a conservative. This needs to change, and it needs to change soon. I would like to quote the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media. People should be able to speak their minds about whatever they want without the fear of receiving angry remarks directed towards them. I sincerely want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before you today. I hope what I have said has sparked an interest in some of you to make a change. As Benjamin Franklin once said, freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When the support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved. Without free speech, we cannot begin to create a better world for us to live in. Thank you.
Thank you both, young ladies, and I can make a statement that I know President Harmon, I know Dr. White, I know neither would ever retaliate, but if there is discrimination against you or any blowback for being brave enough to testify, if you'll contact my office or anybody else, I will promise you that will get a very bright light shined upon it. And I want to talk about that zero here in a minute, but I want to open this up to members of the committee who have questions, and if we can spend some time talking about some of these issues. So the first I have is that's number 2. That would be Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I didn't get your name.
Me?
Yeah,
Tori Thompson.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson, you were told when the Secretary of State of Georgia was going to come speak to your group that there was going to be a charge to have an officer there?
Yes.
And tell me about the paperwork again that you had to fill out.
So in order for us to have a speaker that is...
Use your microphone, Ms. Thompson, please.
Okay. In order for us to have a speaker, specifically Brian Kemp, because there was no implementation of this until we started having recognizable speakers on campus with our club, they said that we had to do the $55 security fee for 4 hours minimum, along with a contracting process. And this contract had to be signed by Secretary of State Brian Kemp. Then it had to go through 4 different departments before being approved, and that was just for us to get the room.
Mr. President, were you aware of this?
No, sir, I was not. I'm not sure when exactly this was.
Previous to the report and the 701 from the Department of Public Safety.
Right. I would say that one thing that we have as a result of our own examination of the way events are done, the way that fees are charged, we have decided we need to re-examine that and that we need a streamlined and consistent policy at the university level that is vetted in one place. At this time, we have it vetted in numerous places, and we need to do better. But I'm not familiar with this particular situation.
Let me draw your attention, Representative Fleming, to the third to the last page of the response of the university. Some of these things are beginning to happen, and I find that as objectionable as you do, and obviously the university did. It's at the bottom of the page. It says the Department of Public Safety's general order of providing security at special events should be clarified. Security at an event because of any expected protest or action against the event is not a charge that is to be passed on to a group, and that's the new policy. I'm hoping that'll be set in stone, because anything beyond that is the heckler's veto. So anytime somebody doesn't want a speaker, all they have to do is heckle, and then that's it. Costs too much. That takes away the entire concept of the university and free speech and everything else. But so that particular piece is being handled, I would hope, and I hope it'd be handled at every university in the state of Georgia as we move forward.
I would think that any time a statewide elected official was going to come to your campus, you would want security there.
And
without
we
having
typically
to charge.
do. Exactly. Yeah. And we do typically have a procedure for security. And again, I'm quite adamant about this, that we will not charge fees just because something is deemed controversial or because there may be counter-protest.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, what was your name?
Mara Davis.
Ms. Davis.
Yes.
Ms. Davis, what was the name of the professor who asked you to leave class?
Her name is Samantha Hewigan. She's a sex therapist, a bilingual sex therapist.
Samantha Hooligan?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to spell her last name.
Do you know the name of the student that threw the water bottle
I
at
do
you?
not. I sit in there's a lot of people in my class, 50 plus, and I was walking out of class and facing forward for the classroom, and it came from behind. So I know the general direction it was in, but I don't know the student that threw it.
Do you know if the professor saw the student?
I
throw
do
the
not. She
volleyball
didn't make a
at you?
comment about it, so I'm not sure if she saw it and then just didn't say anything, or she didn't see it happen, but
Have you ever seen the professor ask anyone else to leave class?
no, sir.
Did you tell anybody about this when this happened?
No. I just kind of went about my day. I was like, all right, well,
You think, Mr. President, we could speak with Professor Hooligan about this, performance in class?
I find the story that has been told, frankly, reprehensible. I apologize on behalf of the university, and we will investigate the matter.
You think you
further.
could let this committee know the results of your investigation of Professor Hooligan, is that correct?
yes.
And so,
You think you could let us
We will
know the
investigate.
results of your
Yes, sir.
investigation?
of course, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies, thank you for your bravery. I know that takes a lot to be here today, but I guess my questions are, those 4 different places you had to go, were they cooperative with you? You said you had to go to 4 different checkoffs to get permission to do this.
Well, with our contracting process, by the time I quite frankly didn't think that it was fair. So I was trying to talk to the student life people about it, and I reached out to several different people. They kept giving me email after email after email. They would not give me a solid answer on whether or not I actually had to do this contracting process, because they said it was newly implemented, yet I had never heard of it before, and we had never had to do it until we offered Secretary of State Brian Kemp to come and speak in February. It was February 13th was our meeting date, so it was about a week before. And by the time all of that had happened, I had explained the situation to his campaign, and they had to cancel because of how difficult it was.
Sure. And I guess following up, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
No,
just
take your time.
to
This-
President Harmon, we're all at that time, that's 2/13, that's only 45 days ago, were all guest speakers treated in the same way? Do they have to go to 4 different groups to check off to be able to speak at your school?
My understanding is there was and again, I assumed this position February 15th, but I will still happily address the question. And that there was as I understand it, there was a new policy brought in place for contracts and events in January, and that all went through a process. And again, I don't believe the individual organization would have to chase down each one, that instead it would go through different levels of review, whether it's a security review, an events review, that type of thing. So that's my understanding, is that process was put into place in January, and it's another one of those things. I made a note here that we should review, because I'm not a fan of bureaucratic red tape.
Well, I guess my line of thinking along that was that I believe that this would cool or freeze out speakers on any side of any issue that, such a laborious process. It's just the way I haven't read all the neat information I have here. I guess my next question, President, is where does that young lady go at Kennesaw when she runs into something like that with a complaint?
In typical cases, in my time as provost for the last 7.5 years and now in this role, one thing I have said is that typically I would send someone directly to a department chair if they did not get resolution to go to a dean, but I've also said my door is always open, and I will make the same statement as president.
So we would send the student to the department head. Is that what you said?
That would be the typical process, yes, sir.
But I guess mine in that world of self-supporting, this is my teacher, chairman, whatever,
Right.
so after that, there's really nowhere, they can come to see you,
They certainly
but
can.
there's not a third-party outside person that looks at all these and says, hey, you do have an issue, and they're their advocate in the bureaucracy that is in place there.
We do have a dean of students they could go to as well. We also do have an ombuds office that is open to all constituents on campus who can try to navigate various issues, including red tape or items of disagreement, et cetera. So we do have various avenues that we try to make available.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that, and specifically, how do they know? She's got a second quarter freshman. How does she know, besides being trampled on,
Right.
where to go? I mean, I think that's what's got me going right now is, you know, they're in a power situation. We are talking about an absolute power situation over a young student, and what does she do besides be run over?
I understand completely, and it is a very notable power differential that's there. And I will say we do our best in terms of student life, in terms of orientation, to make them aware of different resources available. One thing that I have also tried to do with deans and department chairs is to say, anytime you meet with a student, make sure you talk to them about other avenues that are available, such as the ombuds office or whatever they may need. And so I'm not a fan of saying just go find something, and instead that we need to prepare students to go to that next step and provide kind of a concierge level of service wherever they go. I'm not saying I know it happens at every level, but we should have that type of culture.
So, and keep on, Mr. Chairman.
Keep on. There's a lot of questions here.
I mean, how is it treated then? I mean, I guess my curiosity is, you know, I'm a curious person, is how's that treated? I mean, I have, you know, multiple witnesses in a classroom that something like this has happened. And so it goes to the dean of this, and how is the teacher addressed? The department head then comes and said, hey, this isn't cool. I mean, you can't do this. I mean, how was the process? And I don't know how you get tenure all wrapped up in all this stuff, and that's my curiosity, you know.
I mean,
it's
a great question. I've been at higher ed nearly 36 years now, and have seen a lot of episodes of different situations at different universities. It depends on the situation at hand. If it is egregious, then we deal directly with a faculty member accordingly. I have been involved in situations like that. At previous institutions, I have been involved. I'm not saying anything about this particular case. Again, we will investigate. We do owe accountability to that. I have been involved in various cases where even there was a procedure for removal of tenure, which again is a protected class that does have policies and procedures associated with it. But it depends on the situation at hand. But I do want you to understand that we don't take it lightly at all, and treat any situation like that very seriously.
Yes. Because I guess I'm hearing from these two young ladies, but I'm thinking there's a whole other side of, you know, you could be in my classroom or Chairman Earhart's classroom, and you know, you have a different point of view, and that person needs that protection also. I guess that's where I feel that may be lacking. That's all I have at this moment, Mr. Chairman.
I'm keeping these in order, so the next is Chairman Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the ladies, both of you made comments that regarding fear of retribution from professors. And Ms. Thompson, I think you said that, and again repeat, because I know y'all were reading from a statement, but what was your fear of retribution? What specific was retribution?
Regarding me sharing my beliefs, being bullied by other students, being shunned by students and my professor, because I've seen it happen with other conservatives in the classroom, and that's why I'm fearful of sharing my own views, along with being failed.
The failed part, so was there specific mention from the professor regarding not being failed or not passing the class?
No, but you heard from Mara, and
Yeah,
she
well,
even...
I'm going to ask
Right.
again. I want to make sure we're hearing that.
That's a perfect example.
Yes. All right. Mr. Chairman, if I may continue. Ms. Davis, and again, you had more of a specific example. Could you, again, share that with the committee?
Yes, sir. So today in class, we've been talking about having a debate on abortion since I've known about this since the beginning of the semester. However, I was under the impression that you picked what side you were on, like a normal debate, and you found research, and then you debated your side. And I was very much looking forward to being able to find research that supports my side, because a lot of my information that I have now comes from religious texts, and we're not allowed to use those. And so I was very looking forward to finding, I guess, scientific facts support my pro-life stance. And when I walked into class today, she told me that I was going to be switched to the pro-choice group. and I've kind of known she was going to do this. She's been hinting at it. I've been doing research for both sides, and today she officially told me I was switched. And so the entire class, I sat there quietly and did my research like I was supposed to. But then I looked at the rubric, and the rubric said that if we had any concerns, we should come talk to her privately after or before class. And so after class, I went up to her. The students had all left, and I just voiced my concern. I was very polite about it. I just said, look, I morally don't know if I can. I have nothing against the other opinion. I am, like, most of those people are my friends. And however, she said that if I did not, debate for the pro-choice group, she would give me a 0 on the assignment, even though the rubric said that there would be some like alternate assignment. I guess she just said to come talk to her if we had any concerns. So I voiced my concerns, and she said she would give me a 0.
Did further questions, Mr. Chairman? to
I'm
Ms.
somewhat
Davis.
speechless right now, so keep going.
Did the professor switch anybody from a pro-abortion to a non-abortion?
No, sir.
And I guess, Mr. Chairman, and to the President, what really concerns me is the fact that we have university system employees that are putting fear into the students of failing them or retribution. I would like to, one, if you will, what is the policy towards that? And then I guess following up to Chairman Jasper's sort of questions, that we went through this whole process of where a student goes when they find themselves in these types of situations. My question is why should we have professors that are putting the students in these types of situations?
Simply stated, fear of retribution should never be part of the classroom or part of the university environment at all, plainly stated. And if someone is putting that fear into someone, then we need to address that. So I can't say that much more plainly. One thing that we have also just recently been engaged in is the entire university system, and specifically Kennesaw State, are dealing with freedom of speech training, and we are driving that training all the way down through the university so that people understand what truly freedom of speech means. And I think it's excellent training, and we have just recently started that process as well.
Okay, you want to follow up? That's okay.
Yeah, one follow-up, Mr. Chairman. It may be, obviously, we're getting into different, I guess, courses or lines of study. Are we seeing, and maybe the question for both the students and the President, are we seeing this type of animosity, this type of hatred, if you will, in all across all of our studies? Are there certain areas or departments or areas of study where this is being, where we see this? I'd just like to know, and again, a question maybe for both of y'all, or is this isolated to certain types of studies and certain types of departments and professors?
If I could defer to the students and give you the ability to respond first.
I think I've experienced it mostly with political science classes, since that is my major, and also sociology and psychology. But I do know with other friends that I have in my club, they actually have experienced it in their general education English class or their math class, which I don't even understand how that makes sense, but somehow they incorporate, their beliefs into everything that they do. So
I definitely agree with you, and I've experienced definitely most in my love and sex class and also my sociology class last semester. We talked pretty heavily about abortion and stuff, and I never voiced my opinion. We never were required to. We just kind of had an open discussion. Whoever wanted to talk could talk. And my teacher, yes, was very respectful about it, but at the same time, the class instilled a fear in me to not want to voice my opinion. I knew a lot of the people. I'm in the Thrive program at KSU, and so I knew a lot of my classmates, and I knew a lot of them had different opinions than me. And even though they were my friends, I was still fearful because I know I've gotten into very big arguments with my friends. So I definitely think it's more the psychology, sociology kind of majors. I haven't really seen much in my math classes. I mean, we're talking about math. We don't talk about politics or anything like that. But I definitely have heard stories, like she was saying, from people that have still experienced it in those classes.
My response is that I would only be dealing with anecdotal information. I tend to see it in a minority of classes here and there if we do hear elements of this. Have I ever heard the flip side? Yes. I used to be a business dean, and therefore sometimes we might have the flip side from some faculty there. I would say that my guess is that over 90% of the time we don't have issues like this, that people are just in there teaching content. And so, again, anything I would have would be anecdotal, and I'd be guessing at this point, sir.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Smith.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Harmon, excuse me. You're in a very precarious position here, because once we find, or our president is fine, you're going back to work at Kennesaw State, I understand. So you may be in more precarious position than you want to think about. But when I look at this, based on some conversations that I've heard and some information that I've read and heard over in various avenues, it seems like this could be kind of a systemic problem in certain areas of the school, even to the point that this action is condoned, and if it's condoned, then it appears that it may be encouraged in those areas. Not necessarily by you, but by the ones who are causing this issue. Because when you've got a Secretary of State who cannot come to a school and talk, there's some issues there, especially when you have to go to 4 different departments to get approval for the Secretary of State. Do you have to do the same thing for the governor if he wants to come? So, like I say, you're in a precarious position, so I would recommend that the Board of Regents bring in somebody for about a year, get this particular issue resolved. Not that you can't, but like I say, you got to go back to work and live with these folks and get this issue resolved. And, you know, it may not be pretty, but it's not supposed to be pretty if you've got young ladies like these and other students who are being basically intimidated. You know, I've got grandkids. Fortunately, all my kids are out, but I've got grandkids that will be going to school. And if I found out they were being intimidated, I'd have a real issue with that, especially when they're going someplace to learn. And I don't think that's a learning atmosphere. So that's the reason I kind of said it seemed like it may, you know, when they started listing 3, 4, only place they mentioned it may not be happening is in math. When you have that many different areas, isn't it systemic? That's the question to you.
If I'm going to be candid, I don't think it's systemic. Do I think we have some problems on campus? Yes, I do. Are we going to address those problems? Yes, we are. A university should be a place where no one feels intimidated, especially because of their views. And I take that very seriously. And as I said in my opening remarks, we need to be a place that has civil discourse and that we are a marketplace of ideas. I think that is one of the beautiful things about a university, where people can discuss all types of ideas. without fear of retribution, and without intimidation. And so I think we need to put into practice training, policies, et cetera, that ensure that. And so do I think it's systemic? Is it in possible areas? It could be, but I assure you that it is something that can be resolved.
Well, you know, there's some health conditions that you get sometime where you have to go in and cut out the cancer. I'm finished.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Davis, from when we first spoke, when I asked you some questions, I thought I understood you to say you had this class, but when you were answering Chairman Knight's question, this is a class you currently have going on right now.
Yes, sir.
And I don't want to mispronounce the name, but I wrote down Professor Hooligan, is that right?
Hugan. I think
Huligan.
it's Hugan. Samantha Hugan. I think it's H-E-U-W.
Will you please let this committee and the president know what grade you make in that class?
Right now.
No, I want to know the final
the
grade.
final, yes, sir.
Right. Mr. President, do you have any objections to members of this committee going onto your campus and possibly monitoring some of these classes?
We're an open environment, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on there. Okay, what I'd like to do here for just a moment is I've got a list of fairly specific questions for on some of the specific issues. If you'll indulge me on that, and the committee members can, because it gets to this allocation of resources and whether it's systemic or not, what the environment on campus is right now with respect to the equality of access. I did want to point out, you did mention in your, President Harmon, in your opening statement about the pronoun chart, that this was just a student group that was putting this out, correct?
It was a staff member within a support area who put it up on a web page, as I understand, about 2 years ago.
And I'm not trying to trap you, but
No, it's okay. I'm dealing with my...
This particular pronoun chart has the Kennesaw brand on it. That is a branded, university-sponsored, I don't know if it was state funds that were used to print it, state printers, that kind of thing. So it is a university-sponsored pronoun, but you're telling us that the university is not adopting this set of fantasy language. And
The university is not, sir. It was not something that was sanctioned, if you will, by the university, but I agree that...
And let me be clear, I don't care if people want to develop their own fantasy language, and if they pay for it and they come up with it, and you know, you can conjugate 75 other pronouns and pass them out on campus if you created it, you did it. But the university sponsorship of it is problematic. There may be people who don't find these pronouns appropriate, or that they may be concerned about those. So what you're telling me is this brand will no longer be associated with these pronouns. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's one question I wanted to ask. Let's talk about the allocation of resources for disparate affinity groups. It's in your report. It's in your report. It's in the lawsuit. It talks about the tiered student organizations, the chartered, the sponsored, I forget the other two, recognized, and there's 4 tiers. At the top is one tier that has most of the access to the funds and the capacity to get the first come, first served on the free speech areas, and they have a lot more access. And then you have Tier 4, which the Young Americans for Freedom organization, and by the way, I was a Yaffer. I was a big William F. Buckley fan. He started it in 1960. I remember the Sharon statement from way back, and it was a very libertarian organization when I was a part of it at the University of Georgia in the 70s. So it was very interesting, a lot of the things that happened there, and they're certainly not they're a historical conservative organization. And I realize there can be some basic barriers to entry. How long you've been an organization, and you can get it. I get that. But what I'm trying to understand is, it's kind of Orwellian in my mind. You've got some animals that are more equal than others. If I'm an affinity group on campus, I get SGA, that's for everybody. That could be one tier. And you got athletic organizations, maybe that's a different type of tier. But you've got everything from young Republicans to young Democrats to the Funny Hat Club to the Young Americans for Freedom, to the maybe Make America Great Again club. You've got the resource centers for LGBTQ, international students have resource centers. You have multicultural resource centers. And what I'm trying to understand is how some organizations that are affinities, whether it's, because all of these that I've just mentioned, of the 250 RSOs you've got, they all have an affinity for, they're not necessarily political or anything else, but some get massive resource allocations comparatively and some don't. I mean, I'm one of those people that again, if there's $100 and you got 10 organizations, it's simple. They each get 10 bucks. Why does, let's take it, the Christians and conservatives are at the bottom there, and you've got the LGBTQ resource program, that their budget alone, and I'd like to hear from you what the Young Republican budget was, but the resource budget per year for the LGBT, including office space that they're granted at $15 a square foot, that's $22,500, is over $130,677. That's a combination of state funds and student activity funds. Help me understand why they can draw down those when, what would you say, Ms. Davis, or Ms. Thompson, how much student activity funds that the Young Republicans got?
We get 0.
Okay, 0 versus 130,677. Help me understand the disparity there, and tell me they have the same access. Can they have I'm just going to use one of the resource centers. This is not a value judgment or anything else. It's a judgment on who's getting what, and they're all students and they're all that. Members of the committee, look in your package. You see the resource center there, and for the resource center, they have facilities. They have a reception. They have a lobby. They have a conference room. They have a lounge. And they have a coffee bar. What I'm asking you is, can the Young Republicans ask for that and get it on a pari passu basis? Can the Young Democrats get that? Can the Young Americans for Freedom? Tell me why they're not as equal as the other. Why is there a subjectivity in this? Either you, Casey, or...
I'm happy to describe, Mr. Chairman. There are some distinguishing factors. Registered student organizations, of which there's about 250 plus, all of those registered student organizations, regardless of their classification, whether it's as an affiliated, a recognized, a sponsored, or a chartered, they all have access to, on both of our campuses, computers to use as a registered student organization, printing services for banners, black and white paper copy, card readers if they'd like to do that, organization mailboxes. There are staff members within the Department of Student Activities who are available through student organization services for all of the registered student organizations, again, regardless of the classifications. The funds that go to support the registered student organizations come from the student activity fees.
Understood.
And so those are every student, with the exception of 100% online and military and veteran and 62 years and older, they all pay $39 per semester. That's what generates the student activity fee budget. So we have another student-led, primarily student-comprised allocation committee, as in concert with all of our institutions within the University System of Georgia. And so ours is called the Student Activity Budget Advisory Committee. They make the determinations based on the submissions that the student groups submit. So we have departments, but we also have RSOs. Kennesaw Pride Alliance, one of the organizations, is different than the department as it relates to the LGBTQ department. So I know there's a lot of variables there, but all registered student organizations have the availability, not necessarily for funding, but to support.
Okay, let me stop you there, because
Sure.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
But you say that's a distinguishing factor. Tell me the difference in one of these resource center groups of students and the Young Democrats or the Young Republicans. What makes them different? Why do they have state funds to the tune of almost $108,000, and they have I know how RSOs work. You have to have a faculty sponsor, those kind of things, but those are so massively part-time. Those are, I mean, they're guides. They're not paid to do this. The Resource Center has an assistant director at $48,000, a program coordinator at $30,000. And let me go to this. You came with Representative Olens to the Regents about a year ago, and you talked about the need for resources for students who couldn't get core curriculum and classes. Do you remember that? And we don't have enough professors to teach, but yet in the multicultural side and in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, we have over almost $2 million worth of administrators to that area, but yet we still have freshmen and sophomores who can't get core classes. I know I've asked two separate questions. You hang on to that one. Let me hear Casey's response to the, but they're tied together. Tell me the difference in whether it's multicultural resource center that serves an affinity group of students that are identifying as multicultural, or a group of young Republicans that are identifying as young Republicans. Can they get a reception, a conference room that's dedicated to them, not just one they share with everybody else, or share in computers in a library, that kind of thing. Can they get a coffee center? Can they get a conference room and a lounge and all that? That's a simple yes or no. Can they get the same amount of resources? And how would they compete?
Understood, I believe. We do not have the space available to support all 250 organizations to the same degree.
Agreed.
And so at different points in time, the institution made determinations which populations within our students either needed more resources, needed more support, or there was dedicated resources that was set aside to assist them with their retention, progression, and graduation.
So separate but equal? Is that where we're going?
I would not.
It's kind of the same argument that was made in the 60s about, well, you can sit at this lunch counter, but you can't sit with all these others. And the lunch room at KSU doesn't segregate that way now, do we?
No, sir.
Okay, good to know. I'm sorry for the facetious comment, but this is really, I'm really concerned that we have a disparate allocation of resources. You're getting sued over that. Every university in the state is going to get sued. I see the university attorney back there. I'm going to bring poor Edward into it, not as a testimony, but every student group that's not getting an equal allocation is going to have a place to stand to say, why am I not equal in that? And what I've seen in this report, it said that some are more crucial to the mission and culture of the university. That's an interesting subjectivity. If it had been applied conversely, I suspect those groups that claim a history of discrimination would not be happy with that. Go ahead.
All of our space is open to all of our students.
So these young ladies can come into the resource center with, and I've seen you can look on the walls there, and they have all their art and all their philosophical things and everything else. Can they come in to the same state-sponsored hallway and can hang the Make America Great Again posters? And can they invite the Donald Trump Student Alliance to have coffee in there at any time they want? Or do they, and they can have permanent space on those walls as well?
Absolutely.
Get you some posters and put them up in that hallway. Well, I'm going to hold you to that, Ms. White.
Absolutely, you should. As should our students, no question.
Okay, because they can have the same. Those two administrators that cost the state over $70,000, the assistant director and the program coordinator, will spend the same amount of time and effort and be just as cordial, just as supportive of the converse philosophical attitudes of other students on campus?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to take you at your word. And
absolutely.
This is an easy test to take. I hope you have some good posters and that kind of thing, and have some people that you can bring down. And Ms. Thompson?
Which hallway are you referring to? Just so
I believe Chairman Earhart is referring to space on the second floor within the Carmichael Student Center. So there is a dedicated office, a department that is within the area of student engagement. So this is all university space. We have been entrusted with resources, and it is absolutely university space for the use of all of our students.
It does. Okay, well, I'm looking at the lounge picture. Okay? Take a look at that. And it says Kennesaw State University with a brand, and under it says LGBTQ student programs. So if they bring into that same lounge a Young Republicans or Make America Great Again student organization sign, they can brand it with KSU, and they can hang the sign.
I'm happy to bring you there.
All right.
I will personally walk you through the student center. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Well, we'll talk. I'm looking forward to the
Absolutely.
to that. All right. Let's get back to the question of allocation of resources. We've got millions and millions of dollars on the philosophical side of these organizational charts. Casey, a lot of these are under yours, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 people in the Multicultural Student Affairs organization under Matthew Robeson and Rahana Brown. Well, she's the office manager, but he's the director of student engagement. Those 14 people look like about $814,693 worth of overhead. How many how many teachers could you fund with that same level of funding?
Depending on the subject here, I'll just say quite a few.
And as a matter of policy, how would you stack up those types of job titles versus the educational outcomes from the people who are actually teaching class? Which is more important?
If I may answer in this way, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, let me say that this is something that we are examining currently across the university. We're looking at all areas of support versus what I will call frontline instruction. To me, that is where the greatest need is. In fact, we've been looking at data. You're correct that we talked about this a year and a half ago with the chancellor, and we've taken actions accordingly for our admissions model. But at the same time, we are also now, by directive of the university system, a comprehensive administrative review that's looking at all areas of campus to see if we can do things more efficiently.
I saw that, and I'm thrilled that that's about to happen, and that's good. I know you've been completely open to it. I'll grant you that. Okay, I'm going to ask one last one, and this one was fairly disturbing to me. And I'm not even going to share this letter because there may be things in it that could uncover these. This is from a group of administrators and faculty at KSU that sent me this letter. I just got it this morning. And we're court informed. I'm going to read just a little bit, and then I'm going to go into one particular allegation with the respect to this. And there's a lot of them. They're all disturbing. And Regis, I'll probably share this with Mr. Fuchco because it's significant in the allegations in here. But there's one I want to talk about because I find it particularly offensive. And we're writing you because of your hearing on the nature of Kennesaw State University. We are conservatives, moderates, and liberals with a common concern that our university is being used to drive a leftist political agenda that is anti-intellectual, anti-free speech, and academic inquiry, and highly discriminatory to those failing to actively support it. We've heard a little bit of that. Now, again, that's a subjective statement. But here's an objective allegation. And this isn't the first time I've heard this, but it's the first time I've been given a specificity that is enough to make your skin crawl. Number 8 out of almost 14 of these, it says, and I'm just going to read this. In multiple classes, students are required to study or confess white privilege. This includes having assignments in which white students must confess their privilege as part of the class, including having to do so in videos. I've been told that these videos are available. The practice occurs in classes at University College. This is your education group. KSU 1101, College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and multiple classes into Bagwell College. KSU has invited multiple speakers to campus to speak on this issue as if it was an established fact. Several of our members report the dean of the Bagwell College of Education paying faculty committees to, quote, infuse the concept throughout the curriculum of the Bagwell College of Education. Now, this kind of goes along with that issue we had of social justice pedagogy being a job determinant, which, thanks to you, that was scrubbed out of there. The idea that you had to have a political view to do that. Tell me why students of any color are required to confess their white privilege. Is that not one of the most offensive things you've ever heard? Why don't we just have a minstrel show or something as equally as offensive on campus? And believe me, I received more than this. And so tell me that that's not going to continue.
I would say this is the first I have heard of that. And I would just simply say I find that disturbing and will investigate accordingly.
Okay. Young ladies, have you heard of those videos?
As a matter of fact, the current sociology class I am taking, we had to do something similar with white privilege, where we had to basically, if we were white, we had to say why white privilege was a thing and how it was real, and we were required to know it, and it will be on our exam.
That's one of the more racist, vile things I've heard since we finally got rid of the crazy cuckoo clocksers off of the campuses in this state. I mean, there's no difference in the intellectual acuity of a professor that would do that and a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. Both of them are offensive and disgusting and should no longer be a part of our system of education. And you don't even have to respond to that. It just, unless you'd like to,
Again,
let me move on to some other members of the committee. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But first, I just want to say thank you to you. I was just listening to you, and I appreciate you and your fearless look at important questions that make people feel uncomfortable. And I just appreciate you and bringing us here today. I mean, that was tough, but I appreciate it. But I guess my question is for Ms. White. So I'm just looking, you got a lot of papers here, you probably, Bert's, I got stuff written on all sorts of things, but when I looked at the tier policy, I know it's under review right now. I just looked at one word that caught my mind. And it says, some student-led organizations are provided higher classification based on a judgment that the organization contributes to the mission and culture of the university. I first thought of, whose judgment, but then I started listening and thinking what others were saying, and I thought of what President Harmon talked about as groupthink. And we talked about the $39 per person per semester to an allocation committee. And from what I've heard today, in that allocation committee, can honest discussion take place? Based on what I've heard today, I don't think so. Because, it's a groupthink thing in that room where people are afraid, if this culture is there, to say what they need to say, no, I don't think they ought to get whatever it was, 100 and something thousand, that this group ought to get 10,000. That culture, would certainly needs to be cultivated so that people can talk and can have a discussion. And maybe it doesn't need to be this wide open group of people. I don't know. But I guess one question I have for our young lady guest, have y'all asked for money? Have y'all went through the process to ask? I'm curious.
So when I came to KSU as a freshman, I was basically handed the organization and had to start it from scratch. So it took probably 6 months for me to get it started due to the paperwork process and bad standing of the school for whatever reason. And by the time I did that, I asked them, are we going to have to self-fund, or can we get money from the school? Because I know that, like you stated, the LGBTQ, along with the multicultural, they get a lot of money from KSU, which we pay for, might I add, considering it's in our tuition. We pay the student fees. So I feel like our tuition money should go towards what we want it to go towards, but that's beside the point. We did not get funding from the school because I was made aware by the person who I was working with that we couldn't. He told us that we couldn't and that we had to self-fund.
Okay, thank you. It's sort of like union dues, isn't it? You know, that's what I kind of thought of, but I didn't give you an opportunity to answer about in the committees that divide this allocation committee dollars up. What kind of situation is it?
Thank you. The Student Activity Budget Advisory Committee is primarily based with students. And so one student has been elected amongst their constituents, the entire school, whomever votes for the SGA treasurer. So that person sits on that as a result of their position. There are 5 other student positions that are a part of the committee. And then there's a faculty member and a staff member, but the majority membership is comprised of students. And what I continue to absolutely believe in is that our students do their very best because they can be real. And I think quite often our students model the way better than sometimes some of the other adults that are in the room. So I think our students are very, very good. You've heard from 2 of them today in terms of expressing opinions, making sure that we are being content neutral, that we are being objective, and if you have an affiliation with an organization that's coming up for funding, then you recuse yourself from that. So from a culture and a judgment perspective, they've held themselves quite accountable to that. And there are opportunities for any student to be a part of that student advisory committee. I have great belief and great pride in our students' ability to do that.
Is there then a check off where a faculty person, such as yourself, looks at that allocation to look for fairness even at that point? Or you just take whatever they say?
All of the minutes are provided, and then the committee makes a determination, and all of that information actually from the last 5 years as a result of the student activity fee, all of that is available. And so yes, that is then a recommendation to me as the vice president, and when I go back and I read through the minutes, it goes for programs, events, and/or travel. And so if they are in compliance with the university's protocols, I have approved those, yes, sir.
And ladies, I hope you will apply as we end up to this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms. Thompson.
Okay, I was just unaware that we were actually allowed to apply for funding because when I was creating the organization and rebuilding it from scratch, like I said, the person who I worked with, who was a KSU faculty member in charge of student life, told me that we were not allowed to apply for it, which is what I'm confused about.
Yeah, let me clarify what I mean in terms of you applying to be a part of the Student Activity Budget Advisory Committee. You are absolutely eligible to apply for membership to that. Prior to 2017-18 with the classification system, you're right. In terms of funding, that is not something that your organization, in terms of College Republicans, is eligible for as a result of that category.
Therein lies the basic problem with the tiers. You've got some animals that are more equal than others, to continue down the Orwellian piece. Let me ask you this, because it's relevant to that. In your own response to the regents, this quote, on 2 occasions, division staff indicated to a student organization that university's decisions impacting the proposed event were made based on the content of the event and not on neutral, objective factors. Do those 2 individuals still have jobs?
The 2 individuals do have jobs. One has been reassigned to a different decision-making role.
Maybe teaching? Oh, they're not qualified for that. Okay. Just curious. All right, and just with respect to student organizations deciding on the allocation of funds, we had elected organizations in this country for over 100 years that discriminated, and it took a significant statutory change in this country to place in the law that everybody had to be treated equally. And I think what we're seeing, I think the facts are crystal clear. There are certain student organizations that gain the lion's share of the dollars, whether they're state dollars or whether they're student activity fees, and then you have 248 others, or you get 250. I mean, I'm going to be asking questions. I want to see the relative numbers of what they're being given access to, because statistical disparities in some things don't a prima facie case make for pure discrimination, but you develop a pattern if you've got, as we do with Young Americans for Freedom and Christian organizations, that kind of thing, at the bottom of the tiers that can't even access the top tiers because they're not allowed through whatever group that is holding power at that time. These are all state of Georgia students. That group doesn't get to discriminate against them. I don't care if they'd like to or not. There's no democratic piece in there. There's a law that says in Georgia you can't treat them unequally. So I want to, if the numbers are as disparate as I can see just on the top level of this, there's a massive problem there. Ken, go ahead.
If I may, sir, that is one of the very reasons that we are having an outside objective group come in and take a look inside at a number of things. And I was just on a phone call this morning where I said one of the things I would like for this group to take a look at is indeed that classification system, and to see whether we are being objective and equitable, and for them to make recommendations accordingly.
Correct. And you're going to get back to me on that, a couple things. One that Representative Fleming and that teacher, and this concept of white privilege videos. Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Harmon, thank you for being here. You and I have been friends for many years, and
Yes, sir.
and I appreciate you. Understanding the higher ed concept of free thought and creative thinking, kind of creating almost a cushion or wiggle room there, and understanding that, but also recognizing how really in any other profession, if somebody were to get so far out of line or so far off base, it would cost them their job. It's not hard to imagine any of us, engaging in conduct that would cost us our job. And we've heard, not just today, but before this day, examples of things from, I guess, faculty members, I think some tenured, some not, that I think a lot of our reactions are, how does that not cost that person their job in doing that? And my question is do you, and does the university, within the administration of the university, have the ability to terminate someone who gets so far off base? Or is that a Board of Regents thing? Or does the university have this ability? Because it almost seems like it's impossible to be terminated. In fact, if you wanted to be terminated, you almost can't lose your job, is what it seems like. And I'm sure that I'm exaggerating a little, but that's how it feels. Does Kennesaw State University have the ability to terminate these professors that are acting so far out of line?
Excellent question. Thank you. And I'm going to give you a bit of a segmented answer, and if it doesn't clarify, please ask. First of all, one thing that I learned when I was in the state of Arizona and became a higher ed administrator back in 1994, and the first lesson I learned was that there's always other sides to the story, and we have to allow due process. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a great believer in due process, so I will say that while I find much of what I've heard today quite disturbing, I'm also, again, that's why I'm very careful to say I will investigate, and a believer in that due process. At the same time, we also have faculty members with tenure. There is university system policies about tenure and about the revocation of tenure. Mm-hmm. It's a very careful, separate due process. And I wish I could cite all of the steps in that process, but I will say that it is a much more rigorous process that involves other faculty members, et cetera. There are other faculty members who are in other categories where the process is not quite the same. Should always be process for anyone, I believe. But there are different procedures, whether somebody is a lecturer or a tenured professor or a part-time professor, etc. Are there cases where faculty members can be terminated? Yes. Has that happened? Yes. In terms of revocation of tenure, it is much less frequent. And again, in my various roles at other universities, I've been involved in those types of processes. I have not been involved in that process at Kennesaw State at this point, but I will say that we always have to be accountable, and that includes professors as well.
Thank you.
Chairman Knight, and we'll finish it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Casey.
Ms. Casey. Going back to the discussion of the different registered student organizations and then how they're allocated money or resources. I'm looking on my desk at the document that says that there is a resource center for the LGBTQ student programs. And it says the LGBT Resource Center, and throughout the document, what it provides. Our staff are here to answer your questions. So it's staffed. It's a space. Students entering the Resource Center will be asked to check in and tap in. So obviously there's a way to log in or record your visit. The lobby is a space for students to gather, engage in conversation, drink coffee. There's a conference room. Is this a unique physical space only to the LGBTQ group?
Thank you for your question. It is not a unique space in that all of our space is university space. That space has been assigned to that department, and so the space that's within that department, what you've described is what is offered there. However, again, all students are welcome.
Okay, but again, this space is designated just for one particular group.
Not for just one group, sir. It is as a resource for the entire campus community, but the department, yes, does primarily serve, not exclusively, but primarily serves those within the LGBTQ and ally population. Yes, sir.
So it's a department and not a student group?
The student group, Mr. Chairman, is called Kennesaw Pride Alliance. So they are a registered student organization. There is a department or a unit within the Department of Student Engagement, and that is called, it's dedicated towards serving LGBTQ students and allies.
But again, Mr. Chairman, if I can, it sounds like this is a dedicated physical space. And where I go with this is that this legislature, under the Georgia Constitution, we have one thing to do, and that's appropriate dollars. And from what I'm gathering, we have appropriated some sum of dollars to either be proportioned out to build a physical space, to maintain a physical space, to staff a space, or provide services or coffee or whatever it is towards one group. And I'd like some more details on this in the department, how this flows. Is we're sitting here constantly bombarded with, we need more money for education, but yet I'm sitting here seeing money that we're appropriating, thinking that it's going to, education is going to something else besides education. That's one point. My other question goes back to the student, I guess, board that there's a student board that is elected that oversees the allocation. my question is why are we segregating out to do different things? Why can't we just do money that is to events that everyone alike can attend or that has the ability to attend? Why are we getting so specific with such political charged groups that we're even allowing student fees on a campus to be used in such a way that, again, seems, especially in light of the conversation today, so divisive? That was one of the ones that my daddy just told me, if you abuse it, I'll just take it away, sort of a mentality.
If I may try to answer both of your questions as it relates to the physical space that you mentioned, sir. Again, space within the student center allocated currently to LGBTQ programs. However, all students, all faculty and staff are welcome there. So yes, there is physical space, yes, sir. And actually they received that space as a result of an SGA resolution in 2015 based on the use of a smaller space that they had. So student demographics change, student populations change, and you do try to accommodate as best we can, but we also have limited resources, so I understand. But yes, it is university space. As it relates to funds that are available to the registered student organizations, at the chartered and sponsored level of classification, their events and programs are open, large-scale, university-wide. Those that are recognized, they don't have to have events that are open to all students or the entire university. So there are different expectations given the different classifications and the use of those resources. Yes, sir.
So just to follow up, and I do have a couple more points to make, but so is everybody invited to the Queer Film Fridays?
Those are completely open. Yes, sir. People, yes, they're open.
Let's move on. I think the questions have been asked and for some point answered. My question to the president, and certainly as the president, is I know a little bit about dealing with the different universities. While it is not a democracy, it is a kind, benevolent dictatorship, I guess you could say, of the president, provost, and then down to the deans who are over all of the different colleges. Who in the world is reviewing the curriculum that would contain such offensive film, direction, whatever it is, study on something as offensive as white privilege? Is that being reviewed by who? And then not only reviewed, but who approved that kind of curriculum?
If I may, all of our curriculum does go through a process that starts, I'll just say, with a faculty committee and then proceeds up to the provost and ultimately to the president. Oftentimes, the syllabus or the content of the course might be very different than an articulation of all of the actual projects or exercises that happen in the course. In other words, I might see a course heard mention of KSU 1101. And KSU 1101 has been around for a long time, and it has a general syllabus, and we would have approved that, but that does not mean that they would bring forward every type of assignment that they would have or that they may bring up over time. So I don't recall ever seeing specific mention of that type of exercise in any of the paperwork that was approved.
Let me, I want to go back to something that just was said there. Casey, you said that the Resource Center was a department, and then we were talking about the relative allocations again, and that it's open to all students, and that it was chosen by the students. But these students are now spending state dollars in that sense, not student fees. If you created a resource center with space, that's no longer an allocation of student fees. You've testified that they're being given the capacity to obligate state funding, which we have a responsibility for, and that's a major step. So if the conservative Young Americans for Freedom wanted to make a case for a resource center, they could make the same claim that it was open to everyone. It might not feel comfortable for somebody from a differing philosophical perspective to go in there, and I would suggest that many people would be just as uncomfortable in the LGBT center if they shared differing philosophies. I get it. The university environment is about the differing philosophy. Viva the difference. But then we get into the dollars, and you've got one group or several groups, because you've got two other resource centers that are being given, again, a separate but equal treatment there. How do you say that one is more crucial to the university than the other? You use the term distinguishing factors. What distinguishes the resource centers from the Young Americans for Freedom? Let's just take those two, because Young Americans for Freedom has been around since 1960. They have millions of adherents across this country. It's not some new group, and they've stood up against discrimination. Most of as a matter of fact, in '61, at that convention down in Florida, they insisted that those hotels actually allowed the minority delegates to begin, or they were going to move 20,000 people. So they have a history of non-discrimination. But how would they go about getting the same state resources and given that same access? Because we have that pesky little equal protection clause.
What this has brought to light, Mr. Chairman, is sources of funds as it relates to registered student organizations as well as departments. And so as we look at, especially this is the first full year of the classification system for RSOs, so we will go back, we will review, we will seek guidance. The source of funds does matter. And we feel the same way about student activity funds in terms of being good fiscal stewards with those funds, because they come from our students, as well as we need to be good fiscal stewards of the funds that the state has entrusted to us. So all of that absolutely has to be under review, and we welcome that.
So who's deciding on the state funds? That's the resource center. The personnel is 48,000, 30,000, student assistants 7,700, travel's 2,500, operations 2,500, and $22,500 worth of space. Those are state funds. That's not student activity fees. That's nothing else. So you had said earlier that students are deciding on that. That gives me a lot of angst.
No, I apologize. Let me clarify, Mr. Chairman. In terms of any state funds, those are made at the department level as well as at our budgetary level within the division and within our overall university, where those budget funds go. At one time, there was a philosophy to try to put as much on state funds as compared to student activity fee funds so that there would be more available funds for the students to program. Mm-hmm. And so the same way that there was a philosophy at one time, that is something that absolutely always needs to be scrutinized. The stewardship and the trust and the credibility is paramount.
Agreed, but we cannot get in a position where inequality is decided based on whoever is doing it. Those are basic standards in the law. You can't change the basic constitutional rights based on who is making the decisions. That's why I'm trying to get to that point. So I understand how the allocations are done. This committee is not in the business of allocating at this level. That is truly the university system's mandate. They do the allocation every year. I mean, I've been through that budget with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, we allocate a lump sum. That's our job. Our job is also understand what those funds are being used for. That's why we're here today. We want to understand. The taxpayers ask us to allocate money to the university system. We need to know how it's being spent. So the only way to do that is to ask for information. And we're getting information. I've gone through the allocations that the regents put out every year. Every year in April, those come out. I've never seen specific allocations for resource centers in that. So this must be a campus level decision. So the individual campuses are making the determination that some groups get space and state funds and some groups don't. Simple enough equation, right? Okay. Representative Cooper, Chairman Cooper, did you have a question? I'll come on.
I was going to finish up.
Okay. Hold on, let me turn your microphone on, Chairman Cooper. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the President, I would like to propose that maybe you have more of a systemic problem than you're willing to admit. I think Chairman Earhart and I have been here for a while, and we have been hearing reports over the past years of problems with liberal professors and moving. It seems that the university has moved more and more and more to the left. And it's sort of a very slow process where more and more left-leaning professors have been hired. And when you talk about the fact that the curriculum is decided by the department, by the professors, and goes on up, if you have basically more left-leaning professors and they are deciding the curriculum and it goes on up, then it tends to move more left. And I was pretty appalled when recently a KSU professor came down here and was invited at the request of a legislator and to come and pick up and honor a group of young, mainly young, they are living much longer now, young people with diabetes and people with type 1 diabetes. And I looked up what she describes that she teaches. Now, I have been a faculty member. I hold a master's in education and a master's in nursing. And this was years ago when there were no PhDs in nursing, or they were so rare, you count them on one hand. And I was appalled by the description of what she teaches in the education department. We are having trouble all over the state with teachers who can't teach children in our K through 12th grade. They don't know how to teach them to read. And instead we had somebody, and one of my master's degrees is in teaching the education, in teaching disadvantaged learners. And that's what it was called back when I got it, but it's teaching young people that have what she now calls barriers for different reasons might interfere with their learning process. And I was appalled by what it said. I think we've gotten to over where we're not teaching our teachers to teach our young people how to read and do math and survive in this world. Instead, it's all these concepts about race and whiteness and that kind of thing. And I think it's even in our education department. I also have a problem with our nursing department. I mean, better than some, but we're still having hospital administrators across the state who tell us that we're turning out students from across the state in our baccalaureate programs and our AD programs that cannot function on a med-surg floor. I find that offensive. It's the college's problem, not the students. If you're not asking them to work on a specialty area, like the emergency room or OB, but on a basic med-surg floor that they have to do in service for a year and have to put them with a senior nurse and they can't count them as a full-time employee, that's a problem. But yet I understand that we have nursing students going to Dubai. Now, I have trouble finding out just exactly what helps them be good nurses to take care of patients by a trip to Dubai. Given that, but what I'm really appalled about, and why I say it's systemic, the professor who came down to this legislature felt perfectly free and apparently did not think there would be any kind of retribution against her when she did not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and was an example to the students and apparently also influenced them not to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I think that's pretty brazen. And you must not think that anything's going to happen to you when you are representing the university, because it was her group, she was there at the podium because of the group that they run at KSU for the diabetic students. So that was somebody representing the university, basically on university time, with university students, who was so disrespectful. And we've heard nothing about. Has anything happened to her for it? Is there any retribution? Or are they just allowed? So what I'm saying, I think it's systemic. I think it's happened over a period of years. And I think it's now self-perpetuating. And that the faculty, just like going after Sam Olens, whether he was a good president or not, but going after them and a group of faculty members who didn't like him, I think maybe the faculty is the fox guarding the henhouse. And I am very concerned about it. And like I say, they seem to think that they are free with no retribution whatsoever about whatever they want to do and wherever they want to do it. I will never invite another person from KSU to this house. This is the people's house. There are millions of Georgians that never get a chance to come down here, and especially are not allowed to go to the podium to honor a group or represent a group of people and do what your faculty members do. I've never seen it. I've been here 22 years. I have never seen somebody do something that disrespectful, and it's appalling. And I would like to know what has happened to that professor, or if anything's going to happen to her. And the problem with this is they are influencing all these young people they come in contact with. They encourage the opposition against these conservative students by their very example, because faculty members are leaders. And young people in college, we influence what they think. And this is what's happening, and it's appalling. And I am really embarrassed to say that you are president of the university that is in my county. And I am, like I say, I'm appalled.
Thank you, Chairman
And
Cooper.
I think you need to do something. Thank you for letting me have a chance to get this off my chest, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. President Harmon, do you want to?
If I just may,
Sir.
one, on that specific act, I too think that that is disrespectful, and I apologize for that. That's just from me. As far as you asked the question, there has not been anything at this point with that professor, and I don't know that there are policies or anything that we can lean on there, but I have to be very careful about process, is all I will say, but I do hear you.
Well, I would like to suggest that if you're going to have people evaluate people, that you do it with outside groups, not your faculty members evaluating. And if you don't have something in place now, I mean, we have rules of how we may act on that floor. And if we do something to break those rules, we're called on the carpet for it. Now, we are elected, so the Speaker can't send us home and take away our representation. But he can certainly punish us with our positions within our caucus and other means and that kind of thing. If you don't have a written policy on what happens, I think you need one. And as you go through this process, I don't think your faculty members ought to be the one that are looking. It needs to be outside entities that don't have any relationship to this university.
And they are. Okay, we're closing on 2 hours. I'm going to let Chairman Knight follow up, and then Representative Morris had one more question, and I'll give you time to make a closing statement or anything you'd like. Same with the ladies. Okay, Chairman Knight.
Again, I want to thank the President for coming. I know you've been on the hot seat today. But again, I want to remind this body and you as president, and maybe the other presidents and the Board of Regents that are sitting here, we are the elected officials that are charged with appropriating money for higher education. And Chairman Cooper touched on a little bit of it, went off in a little direction, but she touched on it. We're sitting here with demographic changes. We're sitting here seeing education, teachers retiring at a faster rate than I think that we can replace them. We're sitting here seeing healthcare issues and doctors and things like that, scientists and other areas and fields where we're just demanding more resources for the education so that we can put more in there and hopefully educate and graduate more students to fill those coming needs. But yet, when we look at things like this is what gives me cause and concern that we're putting resources that are not meeting the goals that are going to help in those vital areas, and I've only named a few. There's certainly a lot of them around the state. But ultimately, they're going to put people and their families in a position where they're ready to go out and hopefully get a job, support their families, and have the kind of life that we all talk about and we want, is preparing them for a great job and a great career. But yet we're doing and putting resources in other areas. I think that's a comment, but Mr. Chairman, this is not just for Kennesaw State. I would say this is probably all over, and I know there are examples in other universities out there where probably the same questions that we've asked you or the same topics that we've asked you are probably occurring. So I would probably say that from a Board of Regents perspective, we need to get some overview. And President, going back to you talking about getting an outside objective group to look at these student organizations and stuff, maybe that's something we need to get our Board of Regents involved in. Because if we are allocating dollars or appropriating dollars and then the Board of Regents are then allocating those out to the different universities, maybe we need to make sure that the Board of Regents is a part of that process to come in and look, not some third party that we're hiring or a consulting firm, but somebody that's reportable back, that will report also back to this General Assembly. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude my remarks.
May I respond, sir?
Yes.
Certainly.
Just to clarify, this outside group that we are bringing in, this is in collaboration with the university system, and so it will be something that has oversight from the university system as well.
Now, the Board of Regents is, kudos to them, going through an entire exercise of the core administrative functions of many of the universities, and a lot of this, that's part of the reason behind this hearing, is to shine a light on some of the things that this legislative body has concerns about with, again, the allocation of resources. And I want to get to Representative Morris's question, and I've got one other thing and let you cut it. Representative Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick. I'm looking at a flyer that I found online, and I'm 100% sure it's true because I found it on Facebook. Thursday, April 13, 2017, there was an event midday, 12:30, sponsored by the College of Humanities and Social Services that was building relationships across privilege. And there was a breakout session later in that day that said Affinity Groups breakout session. Not sure what that is, but those of you that identify as white, go to room SO 1019. Those of you who identify as people of color, go to room SO 5074. So it sounds like we kept them in the same building, but we wouldn't let them be on the same floor. Now, the partners in this program was the Cole College of Business, the Department of Psychology, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the College of the Arts, and Interdisciplinary Studies. We had 4 speakers. 3 we evidently had to send to Boston to bring to this. 1 was at KSU. My question would be, well, first, I would say I spent a number of years in the United States military, and if anybody in any command I'd ever been in did anything like this, they would be reduced in rank, they would be fined, and they might even be looking for new occupation. The next thing would be paid for this. I mean, we brought people to Georgia to do this. Thank you.
If I may, I do recall that situation. I was serving as provost at that time. Then President Olens, I would just say, had discussions about it. He was very concerned about that, took it seriously, and it did follow up. I do not have additional information at this time as far as...
Oops. Turn a couple of them off there. That's good. Sometimes these things get out of hand and they make that feedback.
That's
Sorry,
okay.
Ken.
Okay.
Calvin, your arm's on the button there, partner. It's okay, it's good.
And so it was just that I don't have the additional information about that. I do know that President Olens at the time took that very seriously and did have discussions. That's as much as I could inform today.
Okay. All right, let's see. That's pretty much all. Oh, I'm sorry. Your light just lit up. Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Johnson.
Chairman. I was trying to wait until the end. I appreciate the president stating that he will investigate these issues. Early on, we talked about having training regarding freedom of speech, freedom from being retaliation. I want to know if this training is only for the staff, or will you have training for the students as well?
What I was talking about specifically was for what I was talking about was for faculty and staff and all the divisions of the university to make sure that we created an atmosphere that allowed for free speech, free expression, and no retaliation. And so that's what I was speaking to. Now, Dr. White may be able to address the student side of that.
Happy to. We do a lot of ongoing, sometimes they're sponsored by the student organizations, sometimes they're sponsored by departments within the institution. Examples include intergroup dialogue, where people will come with varying opinions and create the space where that's civil. It is one in which all are listened to. So we, I think, need to look at, do you mandate it? You can't. Well, there are things that can be mandated. I think as an institution, we need to be able to make sure that we are creating an environment in which everyone feels safe, heard, respected, and helped to form your viewpoint. So we are very committed to that.
Agreed.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
Mr.
Representative.
Chairman,
You have one more question? Okay, certainly.
Yes,
Take your time. Go ahead.
Earlier, Representative Fleming asked that the student get back and state what grade she received. I want to know if it's possible that these two students can get back and let us know if they've noticed any changes or seen any changes, especially in their classrooms with the instructors that they have encountered. Because sometimes when you come forward and testify, things can get worse for you when you return. So I'm concerned as to what will happen to them in addition to the grades that they receive, because one of the students mentioned that if she don't do this, she could receive a failing grade. So
I appreciate your concern, and they both have my email now, and I will make sure that anything that comes apart of that, and I know President Harmon and KC will watch over that as well, that type of retaliation. But if it does, they know how to get in touch with me, and I will make sure that the members of the committee are also part of that communication. Representative Smyrie.
Chairman and members of the committee, I apologize for being late. I was on the conference committee for transit, and you and I have talked quite a bit about these issues. As a former chairman of the Higher Ed Committee and serving on this committee, I just want to thank the president and other officials for being here. And I'm glad that the chancellor and the university system have taken steps to look into this action in the scope of, especially the scope of activity in dealing with making sure that the comprehensive administrative review process is adhered to and followed. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And I know that there have been some issues, and I believe in fairness and equal treatment by all. And I know that you've heard from a lot of the committee members here today, and I just want to express my appreciation to you all for coming and hearing out the committee and the committee concerns in respect of what may be occurring at Kennesaw State University, which I support. I have some dear friends whose family members are there, and I fully support Kennesaw, and I fully support the Board of Regents in their scope and their responsibility as I undertake my own responsibility here as a member of this committee and a member of the Higher Ed Committee. So with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for allowing me to have a moment to just express that.
Representative
Thank you.
Smyrie. All right, members of the committee, we've come to the end of the 2 hours that I tried to promise. I want to state that Kennesaw is a great university. It has great people, has great students, it has people who care deeply about those students. I just want to make sure that that care is the true and only focus, and that's where the allocation of resources goes. And I think there's some significant challenges ahead for this university. As you know, and as you said, and I'm appreciative, I've been nothing but an advocate for this university for many, many years. You and I have been friends for a long time. I've gotten to know Dr. White over the last 5 or 6 years. I have a great deal of respect for both of you. But you've heard the challenges. You know we've got some work to do, and there's going to be a lot of conversation over the next few months up until some of these things begin to shake themselves out. So I'm sure the members of this committee will continue this concern long past the time that I'm no longer here. Some people may think hooray and throw flowers on the way out the door, but these are important issues, and I appreciate you sitting through a very difficult hearing. I know these, it's never fun to put those you've worked closely with on a hot seat or anything like that, so I appreciate your grace and your ability to answer the questions as you did, so thank you. Is there anything anybody else would like to say? Dr. Harmon, go ahead.
I know that I talked a lot about my personal experiences at Kennesaw, but I do love Kennesaw State, and I do want to thank you guys for coming out and listening to us, and thank you guys so much for letting us come out and testify as well. I guess what I just wanted to say is we can sit here and we can talk about all of the things that happen and stuff, but I really want to know what is going to be done, because we are both students. We pay tuition to go to Kennesaw State. We are involved at Kennesaw State. I want to continue to go to Kennesaw State, but if I'm going to be treated the way I'm being treated, the way Mara's being treated, the way many of my friends and students are being treated, I have no interest in staying there. And I just want to make sure that there's policies put in place so that everybody of every political party and every belief gets equal protection and equal rights and aren't discriminated against. And I think that there's some things that need to be worked on, but like I said, thank you so much for having us.
Well stated. And I think you've heard that from that. Members of the committee, anything further? If not, thank you very much, members of the public. We're adjourned. Thank you.